Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your lunchtime with me today. I'm Laura Stassi, and I'm the creator and host of Dating While Gray, which is produced by North Carolina Public Radio. We're going to have a great conversation and hopefully learn more about ourselves and our relationships. And in a moment, I'll introduce you to someone I am so honored to share the virtual stage with. First, though, I have a few notes about today's event. First, your cameras are turned off and your mics are muted. Second, we're recording today's event, and if you know someone who signed up but couldn't make it, or if you have to leave before our conversation wraps up, don't worry about it. We'll send the recording to everyone who RSVP'd. There's closed captioning. It's available for today's event. Just click the CC on your Zoom software to activate the feature. And also, we've already received some wonderful questions, but if you hear something that prompts you to want to know more, feel free to send us questions throughout the event, and you can use the Q&A function. It's at the bottom of your screen, unless you're using a mobile device, and then the Q&A function is at the top of your screen. And if you get a note that your question has been dismissed, don't worry about it. My amazing producers, Kamaya and Charlie, are watching the Q&A closely, and they're going to pass on to me as many of your questions as possible before the event ends. And Charlie and Kamaya, can you pop on the screen for a moment and just say hello? Hi, thank you. Okay, now that the business is all taken care of, I'm so excited for you today to meet Helen Fisher. She's considered the premier expert on the biology of romantic love and attraction. She's an anthropologist, a senior research fellow with the Kinsey Institute, the chief science advisor for Match.com, and she's also the author of 6 books that explore sex, love, gender, personality, behavior, and brain science. Helen was a featured guest on the season 2 finale of Dating While Gray, and we were able to share a lot of her wisdom, but for timing reasons, there was also a lot more that we didn't get time to share with. There was a lot of our conversation like Helen's own gray love story.
I had always thought that, what's the difference? Why not just, what's the point? And I was wrong. Yeah, I was wrong. Marriage is richer and deeper. And now I understand. At age 75, I now understand what a lot of teenagers know, that there's something very special about being married to him. And it's not that they can't leave. You can always leave.
Right.
It's not in my time of life a social statement. I don't need that.
Right.
There's something enormously meaningful to marriage. I've been studying it intellectually forever, but now I get it emotionally.
That's great, isn't it? Let's meet Helen Fisher and learn more about her and her fascinating work. Helen, please join me now. Thank you so much for spending this time with all of us today.
I'm delighted.
Great. You know, I always love it when the expert I interview for Dating While Gray also have a personal gray love story. And you're a newlywed after about 50 years of being unmarried. Can you tell us about meeting your husband?
Well, you know, he wrote for the New York Times for 22 years. And so he's over several years been interviewing me, but he was married to somebody and I was living with somebody else. And I've never put the make on somebody in business. And so I just thought he was a very cool guy. But anyway, 6 years ago, we were both invited out to the West to a friend of ours, really big ranch, really in the middle of Yellowstone National Park. And up for a week, we went hiking and I thought he was very cool. Anyway, and he offered to give me a ride back to the Bozeman airport. There was only the 2 of us in the car and we were listening to some opera. And in the middle of this, he's driving along and he suddenly says, "I'm never having another relationship with a woman. Never, never, ever." And I thought to myself, you know, I'm the only person in the car. It must be he's trying to tell me something. So anyway, so for about a year, we just were friends and we would go and do the movies with a group of other people and nothing special. But then anyway, a night came a year later, we were going out to have some dinner and then take a walk and then go play some pool. And I don't know what got into me, but I pulled my cocktail napkin out from underneath my glass and I said, "Why don't we secretly write down on our cocktail napkins what we would like to win if we win at pool?" So I wrote down on my cocktail napkin secretly, "A real kiss." I was sick of this just nice hug and goodbye for the night. And I didn't know what he had written down. Well, we go play pool. He creams me at pool. And I open his cocktail napkin and it says, "Sex and clarity." So I said, oh, well, I got the sex part, but what do you have in mind for clarity? And he said, well, he just wanted it to be sex with benefits. He really wanted to, friends with benefits. He really wanted to have it be very clear that this wasn't going to really go anyplace. And I said, well, that's okay. But, and we were walking uptown. It was way too late to start anything that night. And I said to him, I said, I study love, as your thing said. And I said, you have to know that, if you start having sex with somebody, sex really isn't casual, that you can trigger the brain circuitry for romantic love, or you could, with orgasm, there's a real flood of oxytocin, and you can trigger the brain circuitry for feelings of attachment. So are you willing to take that chance? And he said yes. And so that's what started it. And then we got into our friends with benefits. And then last July 2nd, he asked me to marry him.
Okay. So you brought up some great points. You talk about casual sex. And before we go on with the conversation, you have spent time researching casual sex. And I want to listen to a little bit of what you told me when I interviewed you.
And I said to him, I said, I do study love. And I just want to make sure of something. I said, when you start having sex with somebody, you can trigger the brain circuitry for romantic love. Are you willing to take that chance? Casual sex is not casual. It can trigger feelings of attachment, and it can trigger feelings of romantic love. I said, so are you willing to take that chance? Because he wanted to have sex with benefits, which was fine.
Yeah. But so it can, so casual sex can trigger it for both people. I guess the problem becomes when it only triggers it for one person.
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
Helen, can we get you back?
Yes, absolutely. I'm pushing my thing here. And
oh, okay. Hi. So
it keeps on popping off. Okay, now.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think that's interesting because I remember reading your story in the New York Times, and at one point he broke up with you.
Oh,
and
yeah.
You had already had sex. Was the fact that you had already had sex, did that make the breakup more devastating?
I already liked him before we had the sex, but the sex certainly made it much more intimate. But what was interesting about that breakup, we had been making love for about 4 months, and we had a good time. I mean, not only just the sex, but we went out for dinner, and we went off to the opera, and we did all kinds of other things together too. But he was a single father. It wasn't the right time to move this into anything anyway. He in Grand Central Station one night, he just said, Helen, I'm just going through too much. I just can't cope. And you know what? I understood. I was never angry at him. He explained it properly. I agreed with him. And what I did, which is something that is really important to share with people, is I said, I agree with you. I can understand it. And I never called again. And I never wrote again. I never wrote at Thanksgiving. I never wrote at Christmas. I never bothered him again. And so on New Year's Day, he writes me a note saying, I've been looking over my whole year here, and I just think I made this big mistake. And do you want to, see me again? And I was very slow about it. I said, sure, I would, but we didn't get back to kissing and hugging for another couple of weeks. But what was important about it is he learned something. He learned that here was a woman who he could leave, that I wasn't going to be clingy, that I wasn't going to be dramatic, that I wasn't going to stop, that I wasn't going to rush off to his house or his place of work and make a mess out of things. He knew that this was a woman who could go as well as stay. And that enabled him to dare come back with me, because he knew that somehow he wasn't going to be stuck for good if he didn't want to do it. So that was really important to me. And that's one of the things that I say to people. Laura, I put people into brain scanners and have studied the brain circuitry, not only of happy romantic love, but people who've been rejected in love. And many of the brain regions become activated, including a brain region linked with romantic love, a brain region linked with attachment, but also a brain region linked with addiction. The main brain region that becomes activated with any addiction, any substance addiction, any behavioral addiction like gambling, whatever, becomes active when you are rejected in love. So it is an addiction. Love is an addiction, a wonderful addiction when it's going well, but a really bad one when it's going poorly. So the one thing you've got to do is, you're not going to conquer those feelings right away of the addiction, but you can just let the person go.
That's so hard.
It's
I was gonna say,
hard.
was it hard for you? I mean, it sounds like you were very reasonable, but were you just churned up inside about it, or?
I sat at the edge of my bed and cried and turned on music to kill yourself by, but I didn't bother him with it. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Christmas was really grim. What I have found, actually, we've actually been able to prove that time does heal. Some of these people who were rejected in love, we put people in the scanner, fMRI, who had just been rejected in love. One of them the night before, often 3 weeks, a couple of months. But one of the people was 17 months, and she still was having a really hard time getting over it. But you could see activity in the brain region linked with feelings of attachment, reduce. So time does heal. The vast majority of people go on. You don't forget it. I still remember him leaving me, but I was never angry at him anyway. So, and it was 5 years ago now. So, but you respect people who leave you. You don't forget it.
Yeah. So, you brought this up right now, and during our interview, you did talk about 3 separate brain systems. Before I get into this, I wanted to remind people you're welcome to ask questions. I already have some questions people have asked about this, but the 3 separate brain systems: romantic love, sex drive, and attachment. And so that brings me to some questions people asked about. One question was, this was a woman looking for a man, and she said, can you find a man that excites you, but also makes you feel secure?
Sure, absolutely you can. I mean, in a good relationship, you really want all 3. You want to have a very good sex life with the person, and it's totally possible after your hair has turned gray. And you want the romance, and you want the feelings of deep attachment. I am chief science advisor to Match.com, as you know, and I do an annual study called Singles in America. We do not poll the Match members. This is a national representative sample of singles based on the US Census. So it's real science. We've got data on 50,000 people because we've asked for the last 10 years, 5,000 Americans, all backgrounds, all ages, et cetera. And when I ask people, what are you looking for? Every single year, the same 5, I give them a list of about 40 things and they can check what they want. Every single year, the same 5 things become our most important. Both men and women of all ages want somebody foremost who respects them, somebody who they can trust and confide in, somebody who makes them laugh, somebody who spends enough time with them, and somebody who they find physically attractive. So that doesn't change with age. As a matter of fact, the older you get, the pickier you get.
So I want to talk more about that later, because I a lot of questions about the internet dating aspect of it. But so you're saying, yes, you can find someone who checks off, who you feel secure with, and also who you're attracted to, physically attracted to. Here's a question from a woman. She says she feels objectified when dating men 50 and older. She says it's like they're not interested in me as a person, but they're more interested in having their needs met on a short and long-term basis. She says she has, she calls them big boobs. She says she has a big boob. As long as you have big boobs and a pulse, that's sufficient. She says she asks questions, but men never ask her questions back, even though she's lived a very interesting life and she's an artist and has lived in 5 countries. Can you answer that from a brain perspective? I mean, is it a stereotype, or is it a stereotype because there are enough people who fit that description?
Well, first of all, she should get rid of every one of those men. I mean, there's an awful lot of nice men who are actually interested in who you are. It's very interesting. I had this conversation with a friend of mine last Saturday night, and he knew somebody who was very close to Obama. And Obama was apparently talking to a young man in his office, and the young was just about to propose to a woman. And Obama asked this young man, he said, I want to ask you 3 questions about this relationship. Do you think that what she says, is it interesting to you? Is what she says interesting to you? Does she make you laugh? And do you think that she'd be a good mother? So, I mean, the bottom line is whoever this person is, they're just running with the wrong set. There's plenty of good men who are dying to have somebody who's intellectually interesting. And it's almost cynical for me to think that I just don't believe that there's a huge number of men who just wants a woman with big breasts and, you know, a cute smile. Relationships have a trajectory, and there's escalation points and breaking points. And so sure, right off the bat, men are interested in what you look like. No question about it. So are women. Looks do count. But then you go and talk to them, they've got the wrong accent, they're missing their teeth, they're rude, et cetera, et cetera. And there's a breaking point. So all the way through the relationship, there's breaking points and escalation points. And maybe she hasn't, I don't know, maybe she hasn't given some of these men a chance, but maybe she's just running in the wrong crowd. There's all kinds of men who want an intellectually interesting woman. As a matter of fact, in my Singles in America studies, 45% of men actually want a woman who has a career, not just a job, but a career. And 87% of men in my studies, these are real science studies, would be perfectly happy to go out with a woman who was considerably more intellectual, made considerably more money, and was considerably better educated. So I think she's just running with the wrong crowd. I don't think she is capturing the male mind.
Interesting. Let's bring Kamaya and Charlie up and see if they have any questions that they can share.
Yes, this is going wonderful so far. We got a question from Josephine. She wants to know what the difference is between love and attachment for Helen.
Oh, okay. Well, they're different brain systems. Okay, first of all, we've evolved 3 distinctly different brain systems for mating and reproduction, as Laura just said. Sex drive is linked with the testosterone system in both men and women. Romantic love, that elation, giddiness, euphoria, sleeplessness, loss of appetite, obsessive thinking about somebody, focusing on them, motivated to get them. Romantic love is linked with a different brain system, the dopamine system in the brain. That's what gives you the energy, the focus, the motivation. And feelings of deep attachment are associated with a different brain system, the oxytocin system in the brain. So that's what gives you that sense of cosmic feeling of cuddliness and trust and respect. So they're very different brain systems. And really in a good relationship, you really want all 3. The problem is that they're not always well attached. In other words, you can lie in bed at night and feel deep attachment for one person, and then swing into feelings of wild romantic love for somebody else, and then swing into feelings of the sex drive for somebody you barely know. But in a good relationship, the vast majority of people want all 3: feelings of the sex, intense feelings of romantic love, at least sometimes, and feelings of deep attachment and trust. Very different brain systems. We want all 3.
That's great. Just to follow up with another listener question here. This is from Liz. She's been a fan of yours for years now. Your writing has helped her get through the worst heartbreaks to date about 7 years ago. And Liz wants to know, do you think heartbreak gets easier or harder as you age? Is it psychologically the same?
It's first of all, it's a wonderful question, and I really don't think that there's any data on that at all. But just from my personal experience and dealing with an awful lot of people over many years, I think the feeling of the rejection is the same. The actual brain system, for example, when you're angry, whether you're 18 or whether you're 95. When you're, when you're scared, you're scared. It's this basic brain system. And when you're in love, you're in love. And when you're rejected, you're going to feel the horrible anguish and disappointment, and sometimes anger, et cetera, no matter what age you are. But I think that as you get older, you're better you can handle it better. It's the young who think, oh boy, I was going to have children with this person. I mean, this was the love of my life. I'll never find another. Whereas as you get older, you have other responsibilities. You now have a good job. You've got a lot of friends. You have a whole network of people. Perhaps you've already had children, and you are able to handle it a little bit better socially. You may feel exactly the same. You probably lie in bed and sob just the way you did when you were 18, but you can handle it a little bit better as you get older. I think the experience is the same. The way people handle it as they mature gets to be better.
And if I can just follow up on that, I'm curious to hear how your own heartbreak and your own falling in love recently and getting married, how that has shaped your research and your approach to research.
Well, it certainly shaped my understanding of the human brain and the understanding of marriage. You know, I mean, I had lived with two men for long periods of time, one 20 years and the other 18 years before I met my man. I mean, I'm 75 years. So I'd had long romances and deep attachments. But I never figured that what was the point of marrying them, you know? But now I get it, just as Laura's you know, video clip showed. And so I don't think that my studies have changed any at all. I've always been very intellectually looked at, you know, marriage, adultery, divorce around the world. That isn't going to change. My understanding of the brain isn't going to change. My understanding of the evolution of it isn't going to change. What has changed is my daily life. I cannot tell you, every time I go out with anybody, I notice their wedding rings, and I notice the wedding ring, particularly on the man. And I look and I say, oh, wow, he loves it. I'm not sure I used to really respect that. I now see the depth of these partnerships. I mean, I went out with some friends last night, and there were two men, both casually wearing a wedding ring. They both worn that wedding ring for what, 30, 40 years. They're not thinking about that ring anymore. To me, it was just a sign of beauty, of intimacy, of connection, and of real true romance and dedication to another person. So I think my feelings about all this, my admiration for people's understanding of marriage has enriched, but my studies have really remained the same. Thank goodness. I mean, I'm a scientist, and I was trying to do my studies carefully, but no, my understanding of the emotional part is way enlarged.
Great. Thanks, Charlie and Kamaya. We'll bring you back with some more questions, but we wanted to continue with the science of online matchmaking. So you mentioned before, you're and I also have mentioned it, you're the chief scientific advisor for Match.com. Can you explain briefly what that means, and what are some of your maybe more interesting findings as they relate to older people?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, they came to me 16 years ago, right before Christmas in 2005. And I just got a phone call 2 days before Christmas saying, would you meet with these people from Match? And I thought, wow, right before Christmas, nothing happens in New York right before Christmas. And that was 2 days after Christmas, and I couldn't even figure who was coming in the room. And there were 11 of them. I thought, is this just a think tank? Are there a lot of other academics? Anyway, it was the CEO on down. In the middle of the morning, he asked me, why do you fall in love with one person rather than another? So I spent 10 years and still more on answering that question, the brain circuitry of why you're naturally drawn to one person rather than another. So I'm happy to go into that. But the second thing I do for them is this Singles in America study. And actually, I've got a meeting today with my handler at Match. And what we will do is we will concoct about 200 questions that we want to know, that I want to know scientifically, but that Match also wants to know, and that we can tell the public. And we'll perfect those 200 questions, and then we will give them to a polling group who collects the data. It costs a lot of money, apparently. And then right before Christmas, we'll have all the answers. And it ruins that holiday for me, because I have to pour over thousands and thousands of sheets of paper looking for the patterns. But you asked, Laura, about what I learned about older people. And there was something that I've always been interested in older people. I'm interested in everybody, but I am older, so it's a crowd that I'm particularly interested in. And there's two questions that I've asked that I really thought were fundamental. One of the questions was, would you make a long-term commitment to somebody who has everything you're looking for, but you were not in love with them? Second question, would you make a long-term commitment to somebody who had everything you were looking for, but you did not find them sexually attractive? The least likely to make that compromise are older people, people over 60. The ones that do the compromising are the young. And I began to wonder, why would that be? But people of reproductive age have to find somebody to send their DNA on into tomorrow. Now, that's pretty clinical, but the bottom line, they don't even think that way. But the bottom line is the vast majority do want to have children, do want to have a family. And so they're willing to make compromises for this larger goal of creating a family together. Whereas the older you get, you've often already had your children, or you've chosen to not have children. You're very settled in your life ways, and you don't want to change. Now, for example, with me, there was a man out west in Arizona who was very interested in me. He was very funny. He loved poetry. He was a fine academic. He was attractive, everything, but I wasn't in love with him. And I didn't find him sexually attractive to me, although he was an attractive man. And I'm going to leave New York City and all my friends and everything that I do to go and sit in some place where I don't know anybody at my age, and because I'm not in love with somebody? No. Older people, they're just as picky as younger people, but they're even more picky about making any real compromise about sex and love.
So even though the kind of myth might be that we want to partner up because we're afraid of being alone, especially as we get older, somebody's better than being on your own. You're saying that's not necessarily, your studies are saying that's not true.
Well, it's not only my studies, but there's studies around the world that as you get older, you get happier. Apparently the people in their 20s are very happy, and people, older people after age 60 are happy. And this is not just my study. I mean, I read a thing in The Economist. I think they looked at over 20 cultures around the world. So people do get older. They're not scared. Older people are not scared. Older women, 76% of women today in America would not go out with a man who was 10 or more years younger. They're not cougars. They want their own personal space. They want their own bank account. More women want girls' nights out than men do. They're looking for a man who's independent, who has his own life, who's comfortable with his sexuality, and is as smart as she is. And if they aren't going to get that, they're going to have a real good time with their girlfriends. So, I think we have really, we don't understand men, we don't understand women, and we don't understand the aging process when it comes to sex and love.
Yeah, so I did have a question that was submitted ahead of time, and it was your thoughts about internet dating. This person says, my experience has been that it's a lot of games, scams, and dishonesty, so I'm not enthusiastic to try it again. Am I wrong to think meeting someone organically is unrealistic?
Well, it depends. I mean, first of all, I don't agree with that it's a lot of scamming. I work with Match, but I know all of them, not just Match, but all of them like to get rid of the scamming. That's not what they want. It's not good for business. And in fact, what they really want to do is get you off their site. What they want you to do is fall in love with somebody instantly on Match. I even asked the president, don't you want people to just stick around and just keep paying that monthly bill? And he said, absolutely not. The sooner we can find somebody for somebody, the more they're going to be happy with it and tell all their friends about it. So it's much better for them if we, find out somebody immediately. And in terms of scamming, I don't know, why does this person think that there's more scamming on the internet than just simply walking into a bar and meeting people that you don't know at all? I mean, I think it's very unrealistic. What's interesting about the internet is that we do this study every year with Match, not the Match members, national study. And as it turns out, this past year, 2020, 40% of singles met their last first date on the internet, not just Match, but anywhere on the internet. And only 16% met through a friend, and only 2% met in a bar or a public place. So it does seem to be the main way of meeting somebody these days. And a very interesting article out of University of Chicago came out and said that if you meet somebody on the internet as opposed to off the internet, you're less likely to divorce. And I thought, now that's pretty weird.
Say that again.
What the article said is if you meet somebody on the internet and then marry, as opposed to meeting somebody off the internet and then marry, you're more likely to divorce if you met somebody off the internet than on the internet. And I thought, well, why would that be? I mean, why would it matter whether you meet somebody in a museum or through a friend, or why would that matter? So I did my own study of singles, and I looked at singles who dated on the internet as opposed to off the internet. And as it turns out, people who date on the internet, not just Match, but anywhere on the internet, are more likely to be fully employed. They're more likely to have higher education, and they're more likely to be looking for a committed relationship. And that's why. Now, She says, is it unrealistic to find other people off the internet? Absolutely not. For millions of years, that's exactly what we did. And I think an awful lot of people would like to meet somebody off the internet because it's work. I mean, it's work being on the internet. I've done it myself. It's work. But you're trying to win life's greatest prize, so it's work that's worthwhile. But the bottom line is, I'm sorry that she's had a bad experience on the internet. I realize that it's hard to find the perfect sweetheart on the internet, off the internet, at any age. But I think that if she wants to meet somebody off the internet, I mean, I don't know how old she is, but I know I'm too old to stand in a bar and meet somebody. I'm too old to meet somebody in my business. I'm too old to meet somebody through my friends. I already know all of my friends. So, and when I travel, I don't want to meet somebody from another country because I'd like somebody to be around. So the bottom line is, if she can find ways to meet people in person, it's the natural way the human animal does it. I mean, you know what? People misunderstand dating sites. These are not dating sites. They all know this in this business. They are introducing sites. That's all they do, is introduce you. And then you either would meet by video chatting, which I would recommend, or you meet in person, and you smile the way you always did. You laugh the way you always did. You assess the person the way you always did. You parade the way you always did. This is not terribly artificial. It's just introducing you. And then you go out and you court the way you always have. So it's not an artificial way. It's just the newest way to do the same old thing. But if that doesn't work for her, sure, then she's got to, I don't know, join a hiking club, join a bridge club, go take dancing lessons with a group of people, do new things, which will enable her to meet new people.
Yeah, I think we have some questions from Charlie and Kamaya.
Yes, absolutely. There's some interest about just evolving conversations around gender identity and gender fluidity. And we're talking about men and women and researching sort of what's going in cognitively when they fall in love. And curious to know, folks are going about through different gender expressions and gender identity and sexual fluidity, and wondering how those evolutions have changed sex and dating, and also how you research it as well.
Well, they haven't changed it. I mean, we're talking about a basic brain system like the fear system. The fear system is going to be pretty much the same, whether you're gay, straight, trans, whatever you are. It's basically a brain system. And when I've spoken to people who are trans or gay or lesbian or whatever, they feel exactly the same feelings when a straight person feels romance. I'm really glad that person asked this question. I have been trying to tell the press this for, I don't know, years. And, the only real difference in terms of courtship is they spend a lot more time on the internet trying to meet people because it's harder for them to find people in person. They may not be coming out, where they work or among friends and family, et cetera. So it's harder for them to meet people. But once they meet people, it's the same old process. They laugh the way they always did. They smile the way they always did. They assess the person the way they always did. It's just amazing. Everybody wants to think that these people are different. I have a great deal of data that they're exactly the same. They're just looking for somebody who looks a little different, but it's the same courtship process.
Thank you for that. I think this pivots nicely off of that question, because a lot of these introductions, as you say, start off as sometimes just friends. One of our listeners asked, is it possible to go from a just friends type of relationship as an older person and eventually act on those feelings of romantic love?
Yes, that's a wonderful question. And in fact, I actually went out with just casually went out with a man for, I don't know, he was such a pest. Oh, Christ. I mean, like for 4 years or so. And then one day I fell in love with him. And I went out and remained in love with him for 18 years. And we went all over the world together. We did all kinds of things. So, I mean, I'm just an example of one, but I can say that from personal experience, it is entirely, and by the way, I'm not sure I believed it before it happened to me. So that's not good science. But anyway, the bottom line is, yes, you can be just friends. And in fact, I asked in my Singles in America study, have you ever just gone out casually with somebody and not found them very attractive or anything, and eventually fallen in love with them? And 35% of people said yes. So it's entirely, this is a brain system like a sleeping cat. Boom, it can be awakened absolutely instantly. And, times change. The person who's just a friend, they break up with their partner or they divorce or whatever, and you're suddenly single, and suddenly they say something funny, and boom, you can be scared instantly, you can be angry instantly, you can be disgusted instantly, you can feel romantic love instantly. Attachment is something that has to grow. You got to respect somebody and trust them, but romantic love can be triggered instantly at any time in a partnership.
Helen, I want to just interrupt for a second. I'm really curious about you had two very long-term relationships, 18 years and 20 years. If I'm just wondering, have you ever stopped and thought if one of those men felt very strongly that they wanted to get married, would you have gotten married?
The first one night asked me if I wanted to get married, and I didn't see any reason for it. He was 22 years older. A wonderful man, and then he died, so that was the end of that. And and the other one, I definitely would have married. Yes, I would have married him, but he was really not entirely emotionally available. So, but I would have married him. Yes, and now I'm really glad I didn't. Really glad.
Sorry.
Just have one more to share while we have you here. I really appreciated this from Christina, who talks about her relationship with her mother, who's been recently diagnosed with dementia, and she's in the early stages, but certainly suffers from some concerning memory loss. She's a proud woman, financially secure, highly educated, but I fear, she feels her romantic life is over because of her age, 76. And this diagnosis. We haven't discussed it yet, but I think she believes if she meets someone now, she will embarrass herself or expose someone to the effects of her condition that she can't control. How do I assure her that it doesn't have to be that way?
That's a really tough question, one that I better not mess with. That's really how to, and I'm in the business of how come. I guess, my father had dementia and died of it. And I guess, God, I'm going to have to pass on that one.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I love what you just said about how to as opposed to how come. So we appreciate the question. That's something I think we can explore on a future episode. We can call in some experts who specialize in this kind of topic.
Really quickly, one last question dealing with women and sex. Angela asks, do women get more or less sexually comfortable as they age, and should they?
Oh, well, I'm not in the should business, but I've certainly got an answer for that. The height of female sexuality, well, the height of when you ask what is good sex, which probably means orgasm, the height of good sex for women is age 66, and the height of good sex for men is age 64. So the young may have more sex drive, that begins to go down a bit, but sexual performance can get better and better. And I will do a bit into the should business. Sure, absolutely, good sex is good for you. Not only does it drive up the testosterone system so that you want more sex, which is good. Any stimulation of the genitals drives up the dopamine system and can give you feelings of romantic love, which is good for you. And with orgasm, there's a real flood of oxytocin, like with feelings of deep attachment. Also with good sex with the right person, the endorphins go up for pain relief. That's great. You get glowing skin because of one of the other androgens. Good sex boosts the immune system. It's good for the heart rate, respiration, blood pressure. It promotes sleep. It brings oxygen to the brain, and it elevates mood. Within seminal fluid are all kinds of really good chemicals. So it's also good for the muscles and the bladder and your sense of humor. So but you use it or you lose it. I mean, it's well worth trying to maintain a good sex life, I think, because it's just good for the body and the mind and the relationship.
Great. Thanks, Charlie and Kamaya. We'll bring you back after a bit. Helen, I wanted to talk to you now about understanding older brains. And we touched about this a little bit, but the older brain versus the younger brain, is there any difference with the drives, with romantic love, sexual attraction, attachment? Is there anything that we all should be aware of as we get older?
Well, with menopause, levels of estrogen goes down and levels of testosterone go down too. But the estrogen goes down a lot farther than the testosterone. So you begin to see in older women the expression of testosterone. You'll see a little more hair maybe on a woman's face. She'll begin to put on more weight around her middle, the way men do. And older women become much more assertive. And they sort of come into their own. They begin to feel more assertive. You see an awful lot of middle-aged women rising in business, going into politics, saying what they mean. So in many respects, I do think that psychologically, women become more comfortable as they age with who they are, with their accomplishments, et cetera. And all the data, as we've discussed, shows that older people become happier. With older men, levels of estrogen go down, but levels of testosterone really go down. In fact, they begin to make more estrogen, and you can see in older men more fat around the nipples, little breasts, and a sweetness and a less assertiveness than young men. So in many ways, the sexes become a little bit more alike, and so I think that. For me, for example, I'm less eager to please. As a young woman, I was so eager to please. Young women are just so eager to please and to get along and to be liked and to et cetera. And as you get older, you come into your own. Now, in terms of sex drive, some women after menopause have a higher sex drive. Their children are out of the house. They've got more money, they've got more time, they're living in a more comfortable place, they know their partner better, they've had the courage to tell the partner what they want, and the testosterone is cooking up, and it's almost a new renaissance for the sex drive. But you got to keep at it, and if you stop having sex or have it very rarely, you're going to want it less and less. So I do think that among older people, they come into their own, they are happier, and if they find the right person, sex can be even better.
So that reminds me of a question somebody submitted in advance, and they said they have been married 25 years and they have a great attachment, but no physical attraction. And so she wants to know, I assume it's a she, it could be a man, when and why does an open marriage work? If you're very attached to someone, but there's not that physical attraction, are there pros and cons of an open marriage?
I'd say that polyamory, poly meaning many, amory being loves, about 68% of singles of all ages approve of it, have no problem with it, but only about 6% do it, and almost nobody does it long term. And the problem is jealousy. We are a jealous animal. 4.4 million years ago, we came down out of the trees, we began to pair up to rear our young. And along with the evolution of pair bonding, we evolved not only this incredible drive to fall in love and to feel deep attachment, but also jealousy. And we don't share well. Now, if this person is in a long-term marriage and they discuss it carefully and everybody's transparent about it and everybody feels that they can handle this, then, whatever. Whatever they do, they do. But I've studied that community. Okay, so there's two things. There's polyamory, which is going out looking for romance with other people, and there's just swinging. And with swinging, it's different. With swinging, you go out as a couple, and you meet another couple or even a group of couples, and with another couple you sort of switch partners for the evening or for whatever, and then you go home with your own partner and you talk about it and you laugh about it. So if they're thinking of swinging, they would be doing that together. If they're thinking of polyamory or finding romance and actual evening dinners and dates with other people, then they're fiddling with the brain system for romantic love. Bottom line is, I admire these people. They want to be. The only difference between adultery and polyamory or swinging is that swingers and people who are polyamorous are transparent about it. They have decided on it. They are agreed on it. They're going to handle their emotions if they can, and they're trying to be grown-ups. But the problem is they spend an enormous amount of time talking about their feelings, talking it out. And the question is, do you want to get into that? If they want to get into that and if they want to try it, I think an awful lot of people do. I'm not one of them. I'm not going to share my guy, but I wouldn't. I don't have the emotional wherewithal to manage the jealousy. But then again, I've kept an active sex life, so it's a little different. But certainly, people are trying it. If there's ever a time in people are more and more open in America, and I think around the world, about trying new things. I mean, you see this with the trans and the queers and the gay and everything. We're trying all kinds of things, and we're accepting them. But the issue is, it's a very personal decision, and everybody's got to agree. What would not work is if one wanted to do it and the other one just went along and really felt terrible about it. So you got to find the right situation, because it is dangerous. People get jealous and they get angry and they don't forget it.
Well, let's kind of flip that a little bit. Is there something that we can do, those of us who are in long-term relationships that have gone stale in the sex department? I think that's sadly more common than a lot of us like to talk about. But are there ways to, if you have this deep attachment to someone because you've got this long history, are there ways to reactivate the sex drive or reactivate the romantic love?
Mm-hmm. Well,
so you've at least got 2 out of 3.
Well, that's right. Well, novelty is what drives up the dopamine system and can give you feelings of intense romantic love. So I would go do novel things together. I mean, an awful lot of people do the same thing every day, and it's that routine that kills the interest. And so this is one of the reasons that vacations are so exciting. You're doing something new and different. But an awful lot of people go to the same vacation spot, see the same friends on the vacation, do the same kinds of things. Go somewhere new, do something different, something that neither of you ever done before. And it doesn't have to be traveling to New Guinea. You can just go to the movies on your bicycle instead of in the car. Go to a different restaurant, wear different kinds of clothes, and pick up a new interest together. Novelty can help sustain or trigger feelings of romantic love. So that's not hard to find novelty in our modern world, after this pandemic, of course. In terms of the sex drive, what I would say is have sex. Schedule it. Schedule it 2 to 3 times a week. And the more sex you have, the more you're going to trigger that testosterone system, and the more you're going to want to have sex. And there's plenty of books on new sex positions and new ideas, new games you can play. There's sex shops all over New York City that might give you some ideas. So, we spend our lives keeping our job, keeping our friends, keeping our health intact. You've got to treat this as keeping something that's important to you intact. So you got to sit down and decide, all right, what are we going to do? Well, how about Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening before dinner and Saturday morning, or whatever you can do. But, people say, well, we don't have time. Well, they got time to go buy new clothes. They got time to go get some extras. They got time to go see friends on Saturday night. They have time to build a decent sex life. They just have to focus on this and realize that this is important. You can do it. Now, another thing that I and my man do is, I think I may have said this to you last time, Laura, we do something called LAT, living apart together. So this background is my apartment in New York, and he lives up in the Bronx in a much bigger place. And generally Monday and Tuesday, day and night, and we're separate. and I go out with girlfriends and do other things, and he does too. We trust each other, so it's possible. And then on Wednesday tonight, I'll wander up there and we'll spend the rest of the weekend together. So, you know, as Khalil Gibran said, you know, put some separation in your togetherness. It's not quite a quote, but the bottom line is, you can do this. These people who are married 20, you can do it. Just have to focus on it.
Yeah. I've got one quick question before we bring Kamai and Charlie back in. It was at the older brain, how does the neurobiology of the brain change after your partner dies? And do these changes persist or do they modify?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't study that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great question that we'll bring up for some other time.
I mean,
okay, Charlie.
You'd have to put somebody in brain scanners before the death and after the death and see what happens. But I would say it would be very individual. I mean, sometimes it's sometimes, you know, you're so relieved this person is out of their pain, you know, or you're terribly scared, you don't know what to do with your life, or you know, I mean, it's going to vary from one individual to another. I don't know any studies that have done that, but it's a very interesting. The brain is always changing. Anytime you feel anything, the brain is doing something. So something is happening in the brain before the person dies and then afterwards. No question about it.
Right.
Okay.
In the same vein of the brain changing, we were talking earlier about testosterone and estrogen going down, but we had a really interesting question about online dating and if ignorant comments eventually trail away when you're in the dating realm. So Susan said, having a lot of online dating and talking to women who have two, you must have a sense of humor. If a guy makes a sexual overture, immediately just dismiss him. But she did meet her partner on OkCupid and they've been together for 10 years. She's 69, but still, I think valid question. Does that, you know, ogling those awful comments that young guys, I know too well, does that persist as they get older?
I hope not. I mean, I have to tell you, I mean, I have a lot of advice on how to handle the internet, and that is one big one. Skip the sex, for God's sakes, skip it. Women don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to look at you. They don't want to hear it, you know, and, but women send a lot of sexy pictures too. You know, it's nice to have a good picture of your body, but put it in a nice dress. Don't make it nude, you know, because it's immediate turn off. It's threatening. Women don't want it. And in the long run, if a man immediately gets sexy pictures from a woman, he has to wonder, you know, what is she up to? So it's not good for anybody. Don't start out with the sex. Absolutely not.
This is one that's going back to actually something that you were talking about with meeting your husband and talking about casual sex and how casual sex is not actually casual sex. There's things going on there. So some interest in whether we should call it something different. Should we call it something other than casual sex? How should we think about that terminology differently?
That's a very cool idea, and I've never heard it before. And if the person gets a good idea of what you want to call it, I am all for it. Absolutely all for it, because it's not casual. Unless you're so drunk you can't remember it.
Maybe we can have a little contest, a little name that phrase.
Name that phrase. That's it. You know, the young are really, I really love millennials. They are really coming up with all kinds of very cool terms. I mean, this thing, DTR, define the relationship. The young are cautious. These people are, you know, they might be having their one night stands, but they don't go on long unless they know where this thing is going. They've got all kinds of very interesting terms, ghosting, benching, you name it. And they're defining what's going on in the sexual realm, in the courtship realm, the way we didn't do that in my generation. And I just think they're very smart about it. And that's a great idea. A new word for casual sex. Let's see, what could we do? Intentional sex, nah, whatever.
We'll find something that rolls off the tongue. One last question. Does masturbation, this is going back to the use it or lose it, does masturbation have the same benefits as sex as partnership sex does?
I have wondered about that, and I did finally find a little note to myself that actually with masturbation, if you reach orgasm, it does flood the brain with the oxytocin and give you the feelings of attachment. So that's only one study, and I don't study it myself, but yeah, I mean, it can calm you down. Making yourself come calms you down. It's probably good for the muscles. I mean, for heaven's sakes. But anyway, yes, with orgasm, no matter how you do it, yeah, you do get a flood of the oxytocin system. I think that's correct.
Great. Thank you. Kamaya and Charlie, you have any other questions for us? No, good. I actually have one more question. Oh, and I hear my dog. This woman said she's been divorced for 16 years. She's had many relationships. Will she ever find the right guy? So if there's some little piece of advice you can take us out on, Helen.
Love is real. If she keeps looking, she's going to find him. It's a basic brain system. They have millions of years ago. It's primordial, it's adaptable, and eternal. And if she continues to make that effort, which I hope she does, she will find it.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, thank you everybody for all your great questions and for coming to our educational lunch. And thank you so much, Helen, biological anthropologist Helen Fisher. Thank you, Helen. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And for everybody who's still in, you can learn more about Helen's work and research at helenfisher.com. And be sure to watch her on the season 2 finale of Dating While Gray, which is produced by WUNC, North Carolina Public Radio. And the entire season is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, NPR One, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And for information on the show, you can go to datingwhilegray.com or check out Dating While Gray on Facebook. I'm Laura Stassi. Have a great day. Thanks again. Bye, everybody.